Zoom a second here, or the YouTube feed. Okay, yeah, so carrying on, we'll move into unfinished business. We have delegation follow-up around the aquatics facilities that we received at our last meeting, and I'll pass it over to staff.
Thanks very much, Chair. And as is typical after delegations, we include the delegation on the next agenda, and often I'll speak to any sort of action or dialogue that we would have with the delegation. In this instance, the topic that was presented was related to feedback on the pool survey and some strategy results. Given that we have an item on this agenda, a staff report related to the indoor aquatics options study, I believe staff will be covering off, I'm seeing nods on that one. Staff will be covering off a lot of the material that was presented to delegation under that staff report. So we don't feel there's any further follow-up required at this time.
That sounds good. Is there any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, do we need a motion for receipt on an update? No? Okay, great. Moving on to a resolution status report. Can we get a motion for receipt? Moved by Grant, seconded by Morin. Are there any questions or comments on the status report? Seeing none, we'll dispense with receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And moving into reports, our first item is the 55 plus BC Games joint bid. And we'll pass that to staff.
Thanks, Chair. Trish Morgan is our Assistant Senior Manager of Recreation Services, and Trish will be introducing, I think, most of the reports onto the agenda, but we'll start with the 55 plus BC Senior Games joint bid. Trish.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Through the chair to the commission, Jennifer was hoping to be here to present, but she is held up in another meeting. So I'll do my best to walk you through the report. So the purpose of the report today is to present an opportunity to proceed with a joint application between the Comox Valley Regional District and the City of Campbell River to host either the 2028, 2029, or 2030 BC 55 plus games. Staff from the City of Campbell River approached CVRD rec staff about submitting a joint application bid for the 55 plus games, and recognizing that these games would be a unique opportunities for the respective communities to host in 28 to 2030. We thought we would bring forward this opportunity for the Rec Commission to determine whether or not we submit the application with Campbell River. In terms of what the games entails, a minimum of 20 sports would be hosted between Campbell River and the Comox Valley. And generally, the number of participants ranges from 2,500 to 4,000 participants from all across BC. Recently, host communities have reported over $3 million in direct economic spending, demonstrated by the significant financial impact of the event. So whether it be hotel reservation, other tourist opportunities, spending in restaurants, spending in our local stores, those sorts of things. Another benefit of hosting the games is the opportunity to create a legacy fund, and that would be directly invested back into the host communities to support facilities and programs for those 55 plus. So if there's any surplus funds, those get split 50-50 between the host community and the Society for the Summer Games. And then that would be split 50-50 between the CVRD and Campbell River. And then from there, that money would be reinvested back into our community. One potential challenge that we do see is that depending on where the CVRD is at with capital projects, like a potential new arena or perhaps a pool addition or renovation, there may be some sports that can't be hosted in the Comox Valley. However, they could potentially be hosted in Campbell River. In order to submit an application, the host need to commit $75,000 of cash and $65,000 of in-kind support, and the bid needs to be submitted by June 26. It's proposed that this be split 50-50 between the CVRD and the City of Campbell River and be budgeted in a future year. So the recommendation from staff is that the Comox Valley Regional District apply jointly with the City of Campbell River to host the 2028, 2029, or 2030 55 plus BC Games, subject to support from other local government organizations to ensure that there are enough venues for a competitive bid. And further, that the CVRD commit cash contribution of $37,500 towards the $75,000 financial contribution, as well as providing in-kind supportive services and facilities between the Comox Valley Regional District and City of Campbell River and relevant local government venues with a deemed value of $65,000. And finally, that staff be directed to budget for the required $37,500 contribution and Service 600 rec grants as part of the 2027 to 2031 proposed financial planning process for either the 2028, 2029, or 2030 budget years. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Thanks for the presentation and bringing this forward. I will go to Director Morin first.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it sounds exciting this coming forward. I was curious about the piece around the impact, the economic impact. It's estimated other communities have reported over 3 million. So I'm assuming if we did this jointly with Campbell River, we would share that benefit. And I guess I'm curious about how you kind of divide things in an equitable way. Like, how do you kind of project or predict what communities is going to get what benefit? How do you work that out when you're doing a joint application? Because it may seem logical to just divide the events into two, but that might not actually equate to economic benefit in the same way. Thanks.
Through the chair to Director Morin, that is a very good question. I am not exactly sure. That would be a good question for Jennifer. I think probably the allocation of which sports go where versus on a facility basis, which one's the most appropriate, and then we would have to sort out from there. But that's a really good question. We could bring something back at a future meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would, if we're doing a joint application, I think it would be good to try to have a look at that ahead of time to maybe circumvent some inequity kind of issues for either community. Thanks.
Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and through the chair. Just a couple of thoughts while going through the report was to decisions such as this get undertaken without some type of a business case being put forward. Like to me, it just reading the report says, from other venues, potential revenues of up to $3 million, but is there an actual business case that normally gets submitted to communities prior to them making a decision on whether we're going to move forward or not? In the report also was made mention of that the municipalities or the host communities were in charge of transportation, and that was athletes going from hotels to different venues, and there's different locations and stuff that we were on the hook for. So I wasn't quite sure what those costs associated with that would be. And then with regards to, again, with the amount of hotels that we have in the Comox Valley, can we accommodate 2,500 to 4,000 people during peak season for the hotels here in the Comox Valley? So those are just some of the thoughts that were going through my mind while going through the report last night. Thanks.
Sure. Through the chair to Director Hardy. No, there isn't a business case that's generally put forward for this kind of a bid. I suppose that if the commission would like to see something like that, we could do a very quick look at things. But with the application due by end of June, we don't have a lot of time to do so. With regard to the transportation, yes, that was a challenge last time a bid was submitted. So that still does need to be resolved. Typically, from what I understand from Jennifer, is that transportation is in-kind service, or it's provided in kind from maybe the school district or a company that wants to sponsor it, that sort of thing. So that is something that still has to be worked out. One of the things that may help alleviate that is not splitting sports between the two communities. For instance, you wouldn't want to have soccer matches in the Comox Valley and in Campbell River, because that would increase your cost significantly. So keeping a sport in one community, then you're doing a lot more local travel than up and down the highway. With respect to hotels, we haven't had a chance yet to look at that. But again, if this is a joint bid, then folks will be staying between the Comox Valley and Campbell River. And so we would hope that there would be enough accommodations there, and maybe perhaps we would be looking at block booking. So there's some reserved, like they do for other large events.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. And yeah, I believe Director Hillian participated in the games in Salmon Arm, which is much smaller than our two communities combined. So maybe he could provide some insight onto how difficult it was to get room bookings when he was there. Might have been. It was a couple of years ago, so maybe not. Director Kerr.
Thanks. And just following up on that last one, I mean, having coached at the last 3 BC Winter Games for youth athletes, we just slept on the floors of classrooms at the public schools. Maybe that's an option for the seniors that are coming. Not likely. My question's actually related to that, though. Prior games like BC Winter Games or Summer Games or the 55 games, there's such a large number of volunteers required. So I'm looking at the last one, there was about 2,500 athletes and coaches, but 1,000 to 1,200 volunteers required. So getting meals and helping out with the events, et cetera, transportation and all of that. So that's a huge number of volunteers. When BC Winter Games at Vernon, it was literally the whole town was volunteering. So just wondering what the plan is for that. Has there been any talk about that? Because I think that's probably the biggest obstacle in terms of logistics to overcome. Thanks. And otherwise, I'm fully supportive. This is great.
Through the chair to Director Kerr, I too slept on floors when I went to the summer games in classrooms and at a college as well. I don't recommend it. So in terms of volunteers, from what I understand, there would be a committee put together, an organizing committee, and from there they would have to start volunteer recruitment. Obviously, if we were to be given, even 2028 to 2030, that recruitment would have to start right away. So, and I would suspect that maybe you're going to some of the local sports organizations that are involved with that, so they can get people within their clubs and organizations involved, even if they're not competing, but maybe volunteering.
Thanks for that. And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Gosh, the memories come flooding back. So for those of you who don't know, where we sit right now used to be Courtney Junior School. And the Comox Valley hosted the BC Summer Games back in the early 80s. And that was for students, and they slept here. I was a billet supervisor upstairs when this was a school. But getting back to the subject at hand, I've actually, I'll confess to a bias. I've participated in these games since 2006 when I became eligible. And that would include in 2010 when they were held here in the Comox Valley. And Campbell River, it was a joint submission then as is proposed now. According to the internet, there were 3,300 athletes and 1,700 volunteers. So that shows the type of participation something like this brings. And, I think the economic spin-off is fairly obvious from that. To Chair McCollum's point, Salmon Arm 2 years ago, no problem with hotels. It takes place in September, so it's a little bit past peak tourist season. And I think the hotels would be very happy for us to move forward with this. Thanks.
Thanks for sharing those comments, and we'll go to alternate Director Jolly-Kerr.
Thanks, Chair. I just have 2 questions of clarification. One related to the specifics related to the development of the society and how we will have input into that as the commission. In part, I guess, 2 concerns there. One, the staff report speaks to what happens if there's a surplus. And you spoke about it in your remarks between the BC Association or the BC Society and then the local society that's formed. But given that this is a joint bid, I'm curious how we would manage that internally to our society that we develop. And specifically the staff report under impacts Indigenous relations, it speaks to the importance of involving Indigenous partners throughout the entirety of the planning process. And given again that this is across 2 regional districts with multiple nations, how we see that rolling out, and specifically how we ensure that our rights holder partners, specifically First Nations between the 2 regions, are represented on that society's board.
Through the chair to alternate director Joliker. I don't have specific information on that. Societies are formed every year for the games, and we've done it before in the past. So it's just a matter of going through that, and perhaps what we can do is bring back something to the commission, also the city of Campbell River, if we are successful, and perhaps there can be someone delegated from the commission and from the city of Campbell River to that host society to, help provide that input and interest in our community. And I suspect in terms of Comox First Nation and First Nations that are in the Campbell River region, that it would be extended an opportunity to also sit on that society and provide input or provide whatever support or not support as they deem fit and as they have the capacity to. So I think everything is just at a very cursory, high level stage right now, and haven't got into details.
Yeah, I mean, this step in the process is really understanding if the board is wanting to support it and put the time in. And yeah, there's many details. And I mean, the primary one would be finding out what year that we're aiming at and then working out the process from there, I would think.
I think I would just also add to what Trisha's been sharing. I think the working with the BC Seniors Game Society would be critical. They do this all the time, and they've got a lot of that history and traction there. So I think really leaning on their involvement and looking to them for some direction and guidance would be really, really important as we move along. So all of these questions can certainly be answered, and we can bring more information back if there's that interest from the commission.
Yeah, I just had one question. If we were successful in the bid and in the joint bid, I should say, and were awarded the nearest year in the 3 possibilities, do we have internal capacity to do it with the existing resources that we have? Is it a matter of getting the ball rolling and then, mostly I guess 2010 wasn't that long ago, but do we have a sense of what the burden would be in terms of our staff capacity if we're successful?
To the chair, that's another great question for Jennifer, because she competes in the games and she also is part of an organizing committee on the Senior Games Society. I think we do. She wouldn't have brought this forward as an opportunity if she really thought that we didn't have the capacity. And again, it may be something that, well, it would be something we would also look for support from municipalities and a large volunteer contingent as well. So.
Makes sense, thank you. Seeing no other lights on, we'll dispense with the receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Moved by Grant, seconded by Mooring, I think, or was it? Oh, it was Brown. Is there any further comments on the recommendation, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Moving on to our next report, the recreation grant policy. Moved by Grant, seconded by Grieve. And I'll pass this over to staff.
Thanks, Chair. And again, Trish Morgan will be introducing this report on the rec grant policy. It comes following several conversations with rec commission through your budget discussions and otherwise. And so the policy here today provides some of the parameters that we've been able to determine through those conversations, and Trish will walk through the presentation now.
Excellent. Thanks, James. All right, so let's see. Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay. So the purpose of the presentation today, I want to ensure that there's alignment between the Commission's goals by introducing the key elements of the draft recreation grant policy, in particular, the guiding principles and the project categories. And if in the end you feel that it substantially is aligned, then you may consider adoption, or we can bring back a revised draft for consideration at a later date as well. So based on the Commission's feedback during the budget process, there seemed to be the main area of discussion that kept coming up is what are we funding and why are we doing it? So I'm hoping that today, when we go through the guiding principles and the project categories, that kind of gives an overview of what I hope was what your intention was through the feedback that was provided through the budget process. Many of the other elements in the policy are very standard for grant policies. And at the end, if there's anything that the Commission would like to pull out for further discussion, absolutely we can do that. The presentation is fairly short, so perhaps we'll go through it and then we can go back to them and I can gather feedback from you. So first, let's start with what was the past process. So in the past, staff would meet with groups from previous years to discuss their needs. Those requests would come forward in one of three ways, either included as in the budget as part of the financial plan. If it was a major request, then they would come forward as a delegation and make that request to the Commission, or it was included in a budget report and then deliberated on as to whether it should be included in the financial plan. The 5-year financial plan, when it was considered, sometimes included funding for groups for multiple years, sometimes it was just for single years. And then in 2024, the CVRD moved forward with the application-based process. And this year we went through that application-based process again, but we didn't have a policy in place. So the program was largely oversubscribed and the range of projects and ideas varied greatly. I can't guarantee that that won't change in the future because funding needs are high, but maybe this will help provide some guidance and help give us a clearer path forward. So the policy is intended to provide clarity and consistency for nonprofit applicants. It doesn't apply to our local government partners. And it supports transparent decision-making, reinforces that recreation delivery is a shared responsibility between local governments and nonprofits and other organizations, and it balances flexibility with accountability. So there's 5 guiding principles in the draft policy. I've numbered them here to align with what they are in the policy if you're looking at the policy. And I'll just go through those and then we'll move on to the project categories. Hopefully the guiding principles answer the why that you're looking for. And if not, that's okay. We can go back and change it, provide feedback, take things out, add things in. So the first one falls into the category of partnerships and collaboration. So recreation service delivery is a shared responsibility between local governments and the many nonprofit organizations that contribute skills, volunteers, and community-driven programming. Number 4, the Comox Valley Regional District Board recognizes that providing financial support through recreational grants strengthens the shared system by enabling nonprofit partners to enhance and expand services. And number 5, grant funding can leverage additional resources, support collaboration, and help ensure that diverse and meaningful recreational opportunities are available to residents. Number 6 falls under the category of project-based. Grant funds are intended to provide supplemental project-based support and are generally not designed to serve as ongoing annual funding. Organizations should avoid becoming reliant on these grants for core operations. In some circumstances, the Rec Commission may support funding ongoing operations. And we heard that through the budget process again, where there were some organizations that the Commission directed us to enter into longer term agreements and help support those ongoing operations. So there's another little provision in the policy for that as well. And then finally, the regional district's federated structure supports partnerships and efficiencies that contribute to recreation services with broad regional benefit. So those are the 5 guiding principles and hopefully answers the why. And here are the project categories, which hopefully answer the what. And so again, based on the feedback that was provided in January, at the Recreation Commission meeting where you reviewed the application-based grants. This is some of the things that we captured from that. So projects seeking support through this grant program must clearly fall into one of the eligible categories. So the first one is the launch of a project or event that is open to all residents of the Comox Valley. Capital projects that enhance or expand recreational infrastructure. Feasibility studies that develop a business case for a new program, service, or infrastructure. Hosting of special events, limited to those at the provincial or national level. And this might be one where you may want to provide some feedback. We've got a lot of requests for special events, and question is, do you want to limit those to provincial or national? Some other grant policies and other local governments do, and some do not. Insurance costs directly related to delivering recreational programming or events, or operating costs that do not exceed more than 20% of the total organization operating budget. These last two fall within the operations category, so this is something that the commission may want to discuss further, and if you want to support operations and to what extent. Again, reviewing grant policies from other local governments, many don't support operations, but some do as well. So there is no clear, consistent way that operations are supported throughout BC. Long-term funding agreements. So in the case where there are organizations like UROC or the Comox Valley Exhibition Society, at the discretion of the Recreation Commission, the CVRD may enter into multi-year funding agreements with organizations that demonstrate sustained regional benefit and align with the Commission's priorities. Long-term funding agreements may support funding of ongoing operational and/or capital costs. And again, we're looking for feedback on this provision as well. We've not set a limit to that, other than generally we've put in that 20%, which may be something that you may want to consider there. So the remainder of the policy, again, is very standard to other grants. You have to be a registered nonprofit society in good standing. You have to use your funding, in this case, within 18 months. In most cases, any funding that's not used has to be returned. You have to use it on a thing that you were approved for. You can't change your mind and just spend it on something else, that sort of thing. So again, very standard sort of stuff. Again, primarily looking for feedback on the guiding principles or the why and the project categories or the what, and where you want to fall with operations funding. Finally, I should note that after the first year of this policy being in place, we'll bring it back for a review just to make sure that it's working as intended. Sometimes when things are new, you think it's going to work really great. You get through the process and you go, oh, we need to tweak that. That didn't really work the way we wanted to, had some unintended consequences, or we need to look at improving something. So that is end of the presentation. Maybe I will. Am I able to go back on this, Lisa? And we'll go back to guiding principles there and look for some feedback.
Thanks for the report and the presentation today and bringing this for discussion. I will pass it off to alternate director Jolicoeur for the first question.
Yeah, thanks. And really excited to see this come forward after a few years of us asking questions about the policy, the existing policy, and appreciate the work that staff have done to date in trying to capture the commission's thoughts on this. In review of the draft policy attached in the appendix, I was a little surprised that we didn't include the commission's strategic priorities in the policy. It does reference, and I appreciate that it references the CVRD's strategic drivers in the policy. And so that's one question that I have. Specifically, I think the commission and the public participated in the development of the strategic plan. And there were some components, I guess, more specifically that I was curious to see if we could include it in the policy, specifically around the how goals. We kind of captured with the work here on this slide actually around partnerships. But the other goal around ensuring that our programs and services are accessible and reduce barriers, specifically the subcategories there around welcoming and culturally appropriate, lifelong, access and inclusive and encourage a sense of belonging. So really the components around equity and inclusion. And so I recognize some of that might be captured under one of the CVRD's strategic drivers, but it is something that I'm curious about whether it's included as a principle or as a separate clause in the policy, or maybe as a specific project. Like we are looking for projects that specifically support equity-seeking groups, for example, pilot projects for equity-seeking groups. So that was one idea that came to mind that wasn't specifically listed under the project slide. So, but maybe I'll just pause, Chair, and hear staff's thoughts on the commission's strategic priorities and goals and where they might see that fitting into the policy.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll pass it to staff. There are some lights on in the room too, so we'll probably pause there and circle back to you after. Thanks.
Through the chair to alternate director Joliker, you're correct that it's not in there, and that's why we brought it forward for feedback. So we could include it under the same section where we've got the strategic drivers. As applications come forward, we score them against the board strategic drivers, but also the strategic goals of the Recreation Commission in there. And perhaps that's one way to demonstrate also to the community that we are looking for things that may fall within those categories. That would be an easy add.
Thanks. And Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks so much for bringing this forward. I too am excited to see it coming to more fulsome policy. I wonder, it seems odd to me that we are including the partnership agreements and one-off grants in the same granting authority. I feel like they should have different applications and processes. So if we're developing a partnership agreement that has long-term funding that's potentially operational in nature, then we would want to maybe develop an MOU that they are this operating grant or the grant is there to ensure that these services continue to be delivered, or whatever agreement we need to create with the organization, and that they don't have to go through the process of applying all the time, but that they do report out. Whereas the one-off grants I see in a different way. They're not operational. They're to get new things started. They're all the things that you've listed. So I see those more as two separate processes. I don't see any kind of budget numbers. So I'm curious about that. And then I think around the events, I'm happy to support the local events and provincial national events. But I have some concern around accessibility. If we're funding one-off events with a fee to enter, then that is naturally a barrier to inclusion. And so if we're giving them money, that should be to increase inclusion in some way. Maybe they provide, if it's a BMX event, they're providing a bike, or if it's a snow to surf or not snow to surf, but one of those other things where you need equipment or something. I would see that as a value add, and that events shouldn't be able to come back year after year for that, unless it's specifically for inclusion maybe. But just to get them up and started as a new event. Those are my initial thoughts.
Okay. Thanks for that. Did you want to comment? I see you're taking notes, so you don't have to provide feedback on all of them. If you are, if you don't have anything to say, then don't feel like you need to say, yes, I heard you.
I can respond to a few of
Okay.
those. In terms of the budget, it would be through the budget process. So every year you set an amount, and then that amount. So like this year, I think it was 82,600 that was set. we brought forward the applications, you decide to increase it by 4,000, right? Alternatively, and some local governments do it that way, or they just set a fixed amount. They put it into policy and then they revise their policy as needed over years. If we do that, a round number would be great. Um, in terms of the long-term agreements, we could certainly expand upon that. We do have a standard long-term agreement that we've already developed for like community halls. It would be a very similar kind of agreement that would have reporting requirements. It would say what it's for, that sort of thing. So we can expand upon that in the policy if the commission would like us to, just to give a little bit more information. But they would be going under what we typically, it's kind of a contract. It's a long-term funded contract. Yeah.
And Director Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious about the financial reporting and accountability requirements. I'm assuming we've always had that, but my recollection is that it's been a bit all over the map. I think we've had even an instance where we've had to chase down some financial information. So I guess I'm wondering whether you see this new policy will kind of tighten that up, and recognizing also that some organizations have a lot more capacity in that realm than others, and you know, to be supportive around that, but at the same time, I think a little bit of consistency around reporting out the financials and you know, where the money is going, and a bit of detail around that. So just curious whether you see that as something that's going to you know, be better kind of managed. And not that we're not managing it well, but it's just, I know over the years there has, depending on the organization and the capacity, there's been some issues around the financial reporting.
Through the chair to Director Moran, that's what I understand as well. So my experience with the similar policy in another regional district is that that got cleaned up a lot when we started having that annual reporting. There is the opportunity also for finance to say, hey, we need to kind of also do a spot check, maybe a deeper dive for some, but generally if they're reporting out how they spent the funds, that their things got done, they're showing us financially that they used it for the correct thing. Things seem to tighten up a little bit better there too.
Yeah, and just, you know, not that I think people are doing things in a nefarious way, but just, you know, some organizations need a little bit more support in that way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I did have the thought too in reading that addition that we may want to consider some type of I don't know what the right word is, but consequence maybe. When it ends up being that the CVRD has had to chase down material that you know, failure to provide this information would exclude from future applications, that kind of thing. One question that I had around the policy, and I wasn't sure if this was drafted this way intentionally or if we want to be more specific, but the applicant eligibility, it doesn't speak to recreation specifically. It's more around our typical eligibility process for grants within our organization. And then the project criteria, only some of the categories mention recreation. So, I mean, capital projects are recreation specific, but I mean, the first one is the launch of a new project or event. So to me, that could be any kind of event, and I'm not certain if that's in keeping with how this has traditionally been used or what our goals are for this specific service. And then same with feasibility studies are not specific to recreation, it's just service or infrastructure, new program. And the special events doesn't say, but it does say provincial or national, which to me implies that we're talking about a sport related event. So I was curious as to whether or not that was written that way intentionally, or if we should add recreation a couple more times.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's probably a good point.
Yeah. Okay. I thought there could
Yeah.
be different thinking on that. And
There
then the
might
other
be.
just overall comment I had around the policy is that like some of this really came from a concern that, you know, there's an increasing demand on this service for funding. Yeah, both with these operational agreements and additionally just, you know, as it's more successful in the community, there's more organizations that are interested in it. And we have really, we're working towards being a lot more clear about the criteria, but I'm wondering about the evaluation piece, whether or not some type of evaluation framework would make sense for, yeah, if it is getting to a point of oversubscribed. I recognize that the budget process will provide a limitation, but it doesn't really speak to how, and we don't have that was also one of the challenges, is that, you know, it's pretty hard to workshop as a 10-person board, competing interests. And I mean, this is a challenge that comes up with all kinds of organizations that do grants, but whether or not that belongs here, and if we've thought about how we could do that.
So it is hard, even in the previous organization that I worked in. And we tried to put through a matrix too, and it was challenging, but I mean, we could give it a go. I think Tina already had done some work on something, so we could revisit that. And then I think there's a need to bring back a revised policy based on the feedback today. And we could look at bringing back like a scoring matrix as an appendices to the policy, and see, you know, if that kind of meets the mark for you.
Yeah, that would be great as a separate piece. I mean, because I think that the policy is fairly close to a point where it would be very useful to have it implemented. And I recognize that evaluation piece, we could probably workshop that repeatedly and keep coming up with a different answer. But I do think it is useful to have some kind of sense of how we would approach that. I mean, alternate director Jaliker brought up the strategic drivers and our goals. And I mean, we do have the principles listed in the policy. So maybe there's an opportunity there just to kind of look at some kind of scoring around that. And it looks like I'm gonna have the last word on that because I don't see any other lights on. With that, we can dispense with receipt. Is there anyone opposed to that? Oh, Director Moran, go ahead.
No, not opposed to that. I was just, when we get to that point, I was gonna propose a different recommendation to incorporate the feedback from today.
Yeah, I think
want
it's
me to go
option
ahead?
2 in the report.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll dispense with receipt and move on to the recommendation, and you could keep your light on, Director Moran, if you want. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, I thought I
Thank you.
turned you on.
I moved option 2. No
Is there a seconder? And is there any discussion on option 2, which I don't have it in front of me, but it essentially is for staff to incorporate our feedback from today. I come back at subsequent meeting, something along those lines. I see some nodding. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving right along to indoor aquatic options study. Can I get a motion for receipt? Moved by Grant, seconded by Kerr, and back over to you. Glad you left your light on.
Well, yeah, I'll be here all day. All right, so Lisa's just pulling that up. Thank you. Okay, indoor aquatics options study. So as James talked about, we had a delegation at the last meeting who brought forward some thoughts, ideas, concerns about aquatics. And as in the recreation strategic plan, we've had it on the books to the next project to do was to look at our options. But before we get to that, we're going to go through a little bit of background here. And again, it's a pretty short presentation. But we've got the Sports Center pool that opened in 1975. It's a 6-lane, 25-meter lap pool. has a hot tub and sauna. I'm not sure how many people in the Comox Valley learned to swim there, but probably a lot of us did. I know I did. The Aquatic Center, that opened in 1999. It's still being called the new pool, but it is not new anymore. It's operating very well, but we've got some big upgrades this year just for life cycle replacement. 8-lane, 25-meter lap pool, a leisure pool with a wave feature, water slide, hot tub, sauna, and steam. And then we also have a fitness center there as well. So when the Recreation Strategic Plan, when you developed that back in 2023, there were two medium-term priorities. One was the Aquatic Center expansion, and another was the Sports Center pool decommissioning. But as we flash forward to 2026, the building envelope at the Sports Center is in really good condition. The pool is still operating. It still needs some work. At some point, it will tell us, because it is 51, that it's time to not operate as it is. But we do feel that it might be a good opportunity to look at not maybe decommissioning it, but maybe some other option as well. So we want to examine the expansion of the Aquatic Center with the addition of a 25-meter or 50-meter pool, and then look at some options around the Sports Center pool. And one of the key reasons also for the Sports Center pool is it's the only pool that's co-located with arenas. It utilizes excess heat energy and from the arenas, and we use that to heat the pool. So it does provide a really great opportunity there to reduce our carbon footprint. At this point, we want to do this because we want to assess all the aquatics options to support informed long-term regional decisions based against other significant capital projects, including the proposed new outdoor pool. And also plan for possible renovations to the Sports Center pool if perhaps an arena ends up getting constructed there. We want to make sure that everything is aligned, and it's not that it would have to be done at the same time, but just trying to make sure that there is a plan that works together and that it was thoughtful and again planned, rather than planning one project and then years later going and planning another and saying, okay, I wish we had done this at this time, and now we can't do that. So even if it's phased, we want to make sure that the plans all align. We do have a lot of information from the past to help inform some of these, the future study that we're looking at doing. So we've got previous concepts and studies. So for the Aquatic Center, we had the 2017 Indoor Recreation Facilities Master Plan and the Aquatic Needs Strategy in 2023. We also did some very high-level space concepts in 2025. Through these first two studies, which incorporated extensive public engagement, we learned that the community is seeking an expanded fitness or wellness center, additional tank space, and there's a need for flexible program spaces to support courses and events like swim meets. The aquatic strategy envisioned an expansion of the aquatic center to include a lesson pool, family hot tub, new adult hot tub, sauna, and steam. However, the commission has given direction through the Recreation Strategic Plan to look at the addition of another 25 meters of lap pool. The aquatic study also examined options for the outdoor pool. However, this is being led by the City of Courtenay and will not be part of this study. Over the last year, through engagement with North Island College, with whom we leased the land for the Aquatic Center, we learned that they are developing their own long-term plan for the college. And at this time, they need to keep the bulk of the land in reserve for their own future development. For this reason, they have provided approval in principle for us to examine expanding towards Rhine Road only. So as a result of that, we had a very quick block concept put together in 2025 because we wanted to know if they're just at a very high level, if it's worth even exploring even more, because if nothing would fit there, then we would have to move on to something else. It did find that there is the possibility, a reasonable possibility, that the aquatic center could still be expanded out in that direction. It does come with possibly some challenges, which this options report and study would look into even more. And then on the sports center side, there is, again, the 2017 master planning process. And through that, it found that there was a need from the community to add leisure pool elements and natural light. It is very similar to many 1975 pools where it's a rectangle, there's no light. Some people love it and some people want to have things that are a little bit more upgraded to 2026 standards. The change rooms also need a full renovation, and a universal change room may be an option. And that there was a recommendation to look at expanding the wellness center to accommodate functional fitness and dryland sports training. A good example of that is, I don't know if anyone goes by the sports center during the week around 5 o'clock, but the swim club is doing their dryland training in the parking lot. Right, so there's definitely a need there, and I think there would be a need for dryland training from also hockey, figure skating, other groups, ringette, that kind of thing. And then the feedback also was to create a welcoming and functioning lobby area with an enhanced concession and gathering spaces. The aquatic needs study really didn't go into much detail about the sports center, just sort of suggesting that aquatics should be consolidated at the aquatic center. And it pretty much left it at that. But again, as we've learned through our work to reduce our carbon emissions, there is that significant advantage of operating a pool alongside of an arena. So we feel, it warrants looking at that option to extend the life of that pool, but maybe doing a full renovation of that. So at a very high level, the study scope would look at a 25-meter lap pool addition, comparing that to a lap pool expansion to 50 meters towards Rhine Road. So still getting another 25 meters. Question is, do we need two 25-meter pools or do we need a 50-meter pool? Additional flexible program spaces and options to increase fitness room capacity and parking will be key, especially now with the daycare across the street and the new residences and just the regular use of the aquatic center. That parking lot is very full all the time. In terms of the sports center, we'd be looking at a lap pool renovation that includes some leisure elements, some light versus a dry floor renovation, and staying within that existing building envelope. So we wouldn't be changing the building footprint on the outside, but changing perhaps components on the inside and looking at what the options are and then getting costs, because that's something we just haven't done yet. A change room renovation, that would be aligned with a pool versus dry floor because the needs may be different. They don't necessarily have to be the same. Lobby, office, and wellness center renovation options and parking options. And again, if arena goes ahead, the lobby, office, wellness, and parking options all have to be looked at as well. So again, it's trying to make sure that these two plans potentially mesh if we go forward with an arena. And I think that's all I have for you on this one. And hopefully that answers some of the questions that the last delegation had on where are we going. We don't know yet, but we have a plan to gather information for you.
Here we go. Turning on mics here. Thanks for the report, and there's some lights on, so we'll go straight to Director Grieve.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. When we talk about a 50-meter pool, I think that was originally envisioned at the Aquatic Center, and then it was shortened because of, budgetary restraints. But seeing as though we're building artificial sports fields for certain sports, with our swim teams, our swim clubs, would they not benefit immensely from a real pool, a 50-meter pool, where they're actually competing in a proper environment? And so what would they weigh in on this? Would they, if you went and asked them, would they not prefer a 50-meter pool? I mean, otherwise, they're all leisure pools, really, unless they're a real Olympic-sized pool, are they not?
Through the chair to the director, so there are varying opinions on the usability of a 50-meter pool. And I think that's what the options, the study options would come back with. Definitely swim clubs love it. Not all community members do. There's challenges for rehab because that water is very cold. For swim lessons, it is too, but it's worth examining and bringing that all back to look at the pros and cons. It may be the right choice to expand it to 50 meters. It may not be, but there's some work to do to bring that forward for your consideration. But certainly, I'm sure the swim club would love 50 meters.
If it's a follow-up.
Just
Go
a
ahead.
follow up on that. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it's sort of akin to, you know, a 100-meter dash and you run 50 meters and then hit the wall and turn around and run back. So, you know, if we're trying to encourage real sports, I mean, all the other sports facilities are regulation size. So it's just, it seems to me to be, I mean, all the community, I mean, household baby boomers will soon be going quietly. So, you know, it's the next generation. I'm just thinking on purely sports oriented. I just think it's a no brainer. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That did sound like a follow-up. Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Trish. I just wanted to be 100% clear on the sports center pool, because it seems to me there was quite a bit of discussion when we had the aquatic study a couple of years ago that it was potentially redundant. And it seemed that there was a fair amount of interest in converting it into an indoor sports facility. It sounds like this further consultation is going to look at both those possibilities, retaining it as a pool or changing it into a different sort of dry land use.
Yes, through the chair to Director Hillian, that is correct. Yeah, so looking at all of those options. What I didn't include in the report is that I see us bringing the report back to the commission once it's done, and then you providing us with some direction where we might go out and do more public consultation. But at this point, we have a lot of consultation that was done through previous studies. I think we're now at the stage that once we get there, we see what the costs are, the pros and cons, what those concepts might look like, then the commission may want to direct us in 2027 to go get some consultation on those.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, it's now been from the beginning till the end of a term since we've really looked at any of the numbers or the decision-making around this. And some of the facts of the situation have probably changed quite a bit since then. So it makes sense to me. One bit of clarification though, in looking at this, are we first looking at the use of the sports center pool in order to determine what the possibilities are for the aquatic? Because it seems to me it's hard to decide on what should go in at the aquatic center if we don't know if we're closing a pool or keeping it open. So are we trying to determine one before we decide on the other, or is it going to be?
So we're going to bring back all of the options.
Okay.
Yeah, all at the same time in the same study. And then, there'll be pros and cons and costs.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. And Director Arbor has a question online. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm wondering, I mean, for the last couple of meetings, we also saw some consideration of the memorial pool as part of the whole swimming mix. So, and I think the more there's changes, I guess, or expectation, like we have different levels of decision making around all that. So hopefully the memorial pool can come back as well as part of that consideration. But that's not what I raised my hand for. I really appreciated at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago when there was a good discussion around the sports center and doing a usage feasibility. And I'd like to maybe ask the commission to consider that as well for the pool so that we have a better sense of of current usage, again, ahead of large capital. So I could either write a letter in or add that in today, at the discretion of the chair and the commission.
Thanks for the comment. Was that going to be included when we spoke about this last? I didn't think it was limited to the sports center, but
Yeah, I perhaps checking with Trish on the or Doug on the recent dialogue that was had around the usage. I didn't think it was limited to any particular piece of the facility.
No.
So I don't know I don't know that further direction would be needed to make sure that we capture those usage statistics as best we're able to and come back.
Certainly through the chair, we could do that. I think we just need to recognize, and there'll be something in the report, that the sports center pool is not being used to its full capacity, and there's limitations with the way it is now because of that. Right. So a complete renovation of that may change that user profile and how much it gets used.
to clarify, Director Arbor, you were speaking to the aquatic center, though. You thought that our discussion was limited to sports center, but I think we were talking about usage generally across both facilities, because they are under the same service. So I don't think you need to provide another point of direction on that.
No, that's great, Chair. If the aquatic center is also going to be included, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question. And Director Brown.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I'm trying to sort out where the demand is coming, particularly in relation to our shift in demographics. So is it a lineup for swimming lessons, or is it a lineup for rehab? Is it like, what's driving the need for a second pool? Do we have that information recently-ish?
Through the chair, we do have some stats. I don't have them off the top of my head, but we always have wait lists for swimming. But we also have jam-packed programs for, like fitness programs, rehab programs. Sometimes there's like 80 people in a pool. So, and lane swimmers are frustrated because there's not enough lane swimming time. There's definitely a demand there. It's just, how do we best address that demand?
Okay. How old is that information now? Do you know?
I believe we had some information last year, but I will
okay.
double check, and I can certainly bring it forward at a future rec commission meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks. And Director Warren.
Thank you. I guess I'm curious about the capacity piece, which Director Brown just talked a little bit about. In the aquatics study, the regional aquatics study, it identified that the capacity was 37%, which is really low. And having said that, it's difficult to get into swimming lessons. So I guess I'm wondering how, I mean, these are some of the questions that I guess would be answered with this report, but how you, when we're not meeting capacity of what we have now, how do we address these issues with not being able to get, I mean, I'm the one in the household that gets up at 7 a.m. to register my grandson. And it's a hit or miss, even 5 minutes in. So yeah, just curious about how future plans will be able to deal with that issue, because we're 37% capacity generally. Well, that was when the last study was done.
Through the chair to the director. So yeah, that was in the 2023 study. I'm assuming that they used 2022 stats, and coming out of COVID, it was probably, from what I understand, it was quite low. We also had a challenge with not having lifeguards at that time as well, because they weren't able to, many of them were not able to work. And so we had to go back through the recruitment and training process. So again, I can look at those stats, but anecdotally, it is jam-packed, that facility. There are times of the day where it's not quite as busy, but I mean, that also goes with the patterns of people and work and things like that. But there's a lot of folks who are waiting to get in or have a hard time getting into programs.
Sorry, I'm just curious about, so we don't have recent stats of what the capacity is, or?
I can get them for you.
Okay.
I know that one of our staff did some stats last year, I just don't have those on hand
Right.
right now, and that she will be doing some again
Okay,
soon, so.
thank you.
Okay, thanks for the discussion and the questions. It looks like we've wrapped up with this item, so we'll just dispense with receipt as there's no direction. Is there anyone opposed? And that's carried. And moving on to the artificial turf dashboard. Moved by Hillian, seconded by Grant, and back to you.
Maybe I'll just wait for Lisa to pull it up there. We'll just go through it really quickly. Things are moving along. We're still in the construction phase. We're on track in terms of the scope, the schedule, and the budget. We're looking at substantial completion around middle of July, final around mid-August. Everything that I'm told at this point is that it will be ready to go for September. Financially, we're doing very well. I have to put out kudos to Nabbit, our contractor, and Binny, who's our architecture firm, as we've been going through, and it was time to order different items, look at if, things that where we could look at different options. They've done a really good job at helping us to reduce some of those costs. So we've only dipped into our contingency by $14,000 so far, and really that's been unexpected hydro costs. So we'll just leave it at that. Anyway, it's going really well. This is just a reminder of what it's, gonna look like. Lisa, you could go on to the next one so we could see the pictures. The lights were stood up just a couple of weeks ago. So you can see what that's gonna look like. We did have one resident just on an adjacent road call in and say, am I gonna have to get new blinds for my family? And the electrical contractor was really great to do a little study for them and show that the light is only going on the field and they don't. And they were very happy. They said, we really want the field, but I just need to know I have to buy new blinds. So yeah, maybe we can go to the next one. This is just a view from the other corner, the corner that's near the daycare. Just looking across the field, they're starting to get ready to do some of the drainage work. If we can go to the next one there, Lisa. So this is the terrace seat wall. So it acts as a retaining wall, but it will also be seating as well. And once that is complete, they can really get going on a lot of the final bits and pieces for the drainage. And then here's just a few pictures of the side that's closest to Shelling Drive, and then the south end of the field where the player shelters would go on that concrete pad there. So are there any questions?
Director Hardy.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I'm just wondering if we can compete with Vancouver for a Major League Baseball team now.
Through the chair to Director Hardy, we'll have seating for at least 25 people. We'll have more than that, but yeah.
Standing room only. Director Moran.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good to see this dashboard. It's nice to see things, a snapshot. And of course, you recognize that we are looking pretty good with the budget at this point. Be really great if we were under budget leading into an election year for this board, but I was curious about at the start of the report where it talks about if there's availability in the budget, the halogen lighting replacement, et cetera. So I just wondered if you had a cost for that, because I'm hoping that, yeah, I mean, it definitely if there's availability in the budget, but it would also be nice to come a bit under the budget. So.
Through the chair to Director Moran. So we've gotten some high level cost estimates. We do need to do a little condition assessment of the lights on artificial turf field 1. But it's between changing out those lights, it could be anywhere from $275 to $375 in order to get the same kind of lights and the same kind of control system. So we're not casting light off into the universe and it's staying on the field. And that control system also will be really advantageous because right now, if a group cancels, say a coach is sick and they have to cancel at the last minute, they have to get a hold of us to turn off the lights. Otherwise they just stay on. there'll be other control mechanisms with this that'll be similar to other fields. So it will go on and off and that sort of thing. And they don't require, like halogens take a long time to light up, right? These will be on and off immediately. And then with the lights that could shine onto the grass field, which we're calling the rugby field, which would provide, maybe a half of width of a field where there could be some practice there. That's around $100,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Two related questions. How close is the nearest washroom facility? And is Comox Valley United any closer to planning for their field house?
Through the chair to Director Hillian, there will be a 2-person washroom on site. So, it's currently being constructed. It is coming up from the United States, and hopefully it won't be hit with a tariff. But it should be in near the middle of July. In terms of CVUSC and their field house, we're having to wait just until we know what's going to happen with the arena, because the location that they identified is where parking would have to be expanded. So they're aware, and we've already had some staff-to-staff conversations about potentially moving their field house back a little bit further. But until that's decided, they're just kind of stuck in limbo a little bit.
Great, exciting to see this coming toward the end of the process and in time for next soccer season. With that, we'll dispense with receipt. I don't think we did that yet. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And moving on to our last report on this agenda, regional field improvements and amenities investment policy, moved by Grant, seconded by, I don't know, Kerr. And back to you, Trish.
Thank you. I'll just wait for Lisa to bring up the. No, I'm okay. I'm
I
good.
have to get up for one.
Doug's gonna help me for this one. Yeah. Oh no, he's gonna write things on the boards for us. Mhm. Oh, if you go.
Yeah.
All right, field investment and amenities policy. So we thought we would do this maybe a little bit more like a workshop. Again, through the budget process, the Rec Commission allocated $200,000 towards starting a reserve to invest in field improvements or amenities throughout the region. And that was an item that was identified in the Recreation Strategic Plan. So we've put together some ideas and thoughts today. We gathered feedback also from our municipal partners as well, and got some great ideas from them as well. So we thought we would go through this section by section, and if you can provide us with some feedback on, do you think this is working, or this is a workable idea? Do we want to see something different? Are we moving in the right direction? Doug is going to help. And if there's anything that doesn't really fit this policy, but it's something we know we need to follow up on, instead of having a parking lot, he's written benched. And then if there are changes to the things that are on the slides, then that goes under game plan. And then we can bring back a policy at a future date. Does that sound okay? Okay. I guess, Lisa, you're gonna, oh, no, it works. Okay. So, purpose of today, introduce elements of a draft policy to support investment into field improvements and amenities, test alignment with the Commission's priorities, identify areas of support and those that need refinement, and confirm readiness to advance to drafting a policy that will be brought back at a future meeting. So why? In the sports field strategy, I believe this is where it started. It identified that rather than building many more fields in the Comox Valley, other than another artificial turf field at this time, further investment could be made into our current inventory, which would unlock additional playable hours, improve usability and reliability, and enhance safety and user experience. And that would maximize the return on our existing public assets. So again, rather than building many new fields, let's work with the ones that we have and see if we can upgrade them to make them more usable and more friendly for the community. So the purpose of the policy is to look at strategically investing in field improvements and amenities that enhance usability, quality, and sustainability, support rural and urban areas, ensure current inventory is fully utilized, and prepare for future growth and demand. Do we want to go over this policy purpose now? Sometimes I find it's more helpful to come back to it at the end. Come back? Okay. Policy principles. Not written out in full, but just in bullet point, regional partnerships and shared benefits. There are strategic investment leads to sustainable field upgrades. Grant funding can leverage collaboration and resources. There's fairness through shared systems and coordinated planning, and long-term, we want to look at long-term financial sustainability. Are there any principles on this that are most important to you? Are there any that need refinement? Have we missed anything? They're very similar-ish to the recreation grant. But this policy would apply to our municipal partners, the school district, and rural community groups that operate fields. So far, so good. We can always come back to it later. Equally important, okay. Intended outcomes. The program aims to increase playable and reliable field hours, improve user experience with modern amenities, reduce barriers to use such as lighting, drainage, and seasonality, support coordinated and long-term regional planning, and promote access to both rural and urban sports fields. Are there any other outcomes that should be added? Is there anything that we should be taking out of there?
Go ahead, Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, I think what was missing here for me is, and I don't have the plan in front of me, but our corporate emissions work and any specific outcomes we might want to have around climate mitigation. Again, I'm not an expert in this space around recreation facilities and what it is that they can add, but I don't know if that's from the supply management of the supply of goods for upgrades of facilities. Or in the creation of new facilities. But I think that's one piece here that I think should be reflective of the ongoing work the CVRD does as a whole, but also for the commission around climate change and emissions.
And you mean corporate emissions related to field use or?
Yeah, correct. And again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know how big or small that is. I know that we've spent some time talking about plastics when it comes to fields, but maybe there's some things around LEDs and the type of lighting that we use. Again, I'm not the expert, but I do know that we have some strong commitments. So maybe that could be reflected here.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure I understood what you meant. Thanks.
Yeah, I just
Yes,
add to that, that's a good suggestion. There's lighting, as you've mentioned, when we look at drainage, we could look at retention pond systems if the community wants to build that to add extra habitat. Obviously in operations, how you mow and maintain your fields has impacts. So there's definitely impacts on fields, and like any structure that can look at better ways to prevent increasing global temperatures or whatever your climate stance is on that. So yeah, that's potentially in the game plan. I just know I'm just here because I don't think you can see me on the back. So we've added it to the game plan.
And I could see if we were to speak about adding a bullet to this this list of intended outcomes, alignment with corporate energy emissions targets, could cover a lot of those different elements and make sure that we're paying attention to our program.
I guess I have a question just around, I mean, if we have these principles as overarching principles as part of our organization, do they need to be highlighted when we bring in something like this that's for a specific like allocation of a resource, that if we're not mentioning our corporate energy plan, then are we ignoring it? I guess, because I mean, then we could bring in also things to do with our strategic drivers and a whole bunch of things. But, you know, if we're just focusing on allocating this new resource that we've set aside in the budget, do we need to circle back to these bigger policy pieces?
I think indicating to the applicants who might be other municipalities, school districts, and other partners, you know, there's potential down the road that we may have resources beyond what the rec commission is willing to allocate. So if you add some of those drivers or interests to help you when you know, go through the applications or make decisions, indicating that early on to the applicants probably has some benefit.
Okay, thanks. And Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Do we want anything in our intended outcomes about enhancing participation? When we talk about promoting access in the rural and urban context, are we also talking about promoting access in general? So in terms of accessibility, availability to equity seeking groups, those types of concepts, or does that come in somewhere else?
Allocation policy.
Through the chair, I think increasing playable hours does, but in terms of equity and inclusion, maybe that's not included in there, and that might be, I think, something that we could look at adding as well. And again, like to Doug's point, having these in the policy so the applicants know, and then they can address how they may be looking to meet those intended outcomes. I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to kind of follow up on that as well, we are doing the field allocation policy, and I do believe that that is also captured in that you know, that we have prioritization and the field allocation policy around youth access and prioritization. So yeah, I guess my question is around the like, and I was maybe going to ask this after, but seeing as it's come up already, it seems to me that the field allocation policy is not necessarily exactly what we're working on today, but it seems like an integral piece of this work, that if we're going to look at how we support field facilities outside of our existing services, that we have to have those facilities also integrated in this allocation policy that we're trying to bring in as a region. And so I guess I just wanted to highlight that, to me, those two things need to go together in order for this, you know, this allocation of financial resources to work, that these facilities need to be adhering to this wider policy that we're trying to develop.
Certainly, and I think later on, I've got that in one of the slides, that the urban fields are part of that allocation process and policy, not the rural fields. They could if they choose to, but that's more about decreasing barriers to recreation in more rural areas. So
yeah, and the demands on those fields are quite a bit different, are they not? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Seeing no other lights on, just carry on. Oh,
I did have.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jared. To just have the under modern amenities, I'm wondering if that includes, again, not an expert here, but wondering if that includes things like with, again, the impacts of climate change and heat domes. And I recognize that sports might be canceled past a certain threshold of heat. But does that include things like shade structures and water fountains? Would that be considered as an amenity that we would request as part of an upgrade?
Through the chair to the alternate director, certainly shade structures, misters, water fountains. We've given some examples of things, but it's not limited to those examples only, but those definitely would be some things that could be looked at. And I think maybe we don't want to limit the policy to specific items, but leaving it broad enough so when the applicants come forward, they they have, you know, the ideas of what might be used, and it might be something that we never thought of, but it fits in the amenities category. So, all right, good to go to the next. So eligible applicants. So this is a little bit of a weird one. CVRD and member municipalities. We are, you know, partners in the artificial turf fields. So that's why we're included in that. But member municipalities and the Comox Valley School District, they operate the vast majority of fields within the Comox Valley. And then we do have nonprofits that operate sports fields as well. They're largely in the rural areas and they have some different needs, but we want to be able to support them as well. Is there any other eligible applicants that should be included? I think that I would be hard pressed to find another.
Yeah, I'm not sure eligible for what,
To be able to make an application for funding
to make an application for a field.
for field improvements or amenity improvements.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was private sector entities. For example, people who run the Comox Valley Sports and Social Club, things like that. I don't know whether that fits here or not.
No, that wouldn't be, because they're a user group.
Okay.
Largely, yeah. They might, when we get to the process, there is an opportunity for user groups to provide input into the process.
Thanks.
All right, go on to the next one. Okay, eligible projects. So it falls into generally one or two category or two categories. The first one is field improvements. Field improvements would increase playability. It must be capital in nature, meaning they involve construction, replacement, or major upgrades to field infrastructure, not routine maintenance. So some examples, again, it's including but not limited to major turf reestablishment, irrigation installation, establishment of drainage, lighting, which also could be considered an amenity. Shelters could be as well, and fencing. Field amenities generally enhance user experience, safety, and operations of sports fields. So examples would include washrooms, storage facilities, clubhouses, seating, safety equipment. As alternate director Joliger mentioned, it could be also water fountains, shade structures, misters, those sorts of things as well. Does this generally capture the two project types? Again, not having to limit it to the actual projects, but the two project types that the commission would be interested in supporting. All right, good. We'll move on to the next one. Okay, prioritization framework. And again, just throwing this out because we do know that the demand inevitably is going to exceed the available funding. And we want to make sure that the process is transparent and defensible and it aligns with regional goals. So for urban projects, we'll be looking at unlocking new playable and bookable hours. So through that field allocation process, improving sport experiences, balancing regional field use, ensuring equity and inclusion. The projects are ready to go and they're climate resilient. So that brings in some of the other things that you've already talked about. For rural projects, looking at addressing infrastructure gaps, improving access where travel is a barrier, and project readiness. And we're not going to say how far the travel is, but if you're out in the rural area, it's further to go to get to an available field than it is if you're in the urban areas. In terms of project readiness, I guess one of the areas that we're looking for feedback is between the time of application to the time of construction or installation, how long of a time frame should we provide for that? Is it something that we want to see happen within the next 12 months, 24, 36? Understanding sometimes organizations have, if they get a grant, they can use that to leverage other funds. And sometimes that can take quite a long time, particularly if they're federal funds. I think the longest I waited for a reply on a grant was 36 months to be told no. So,
Yeah, I do think some type of limitation needs to go in place. I mean, the example already came up today of providing funds for a field house that has now been in limbo since before I was on the board. And yeah, I mean, the likelihood of having to come back and submit due to cost changes or circumstances, there's a point at which we're, setting funds aside that yeah, that may not be adequate or could be used in a shorter time frame. I mean, if part of the requirement is project readiness, and they're in partnership with, I mean, there's two possibilities here, because within municipalities, I think there's more resources as well to move projects ahead more quickly when it's a large organization versus a nonprofit that's trying to stitch a budget together in a different way. But I would say like project initiation within, I don't know, 18 months to 24 months seems like a reasonable timeline. Although I'd be open to hearing why I might be wrong on that, or why that maybe is too tight of timeline. But it is frustrating when money has been set aside and budgeted for that doesn't provide the facility that we are looking to see in the community. So Director Brown.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we'd want to position ourselves as like the final funder, not the first funder. So we want, if we're working, given the people we're likely working with, they're coming with some capacity to start with. We don't want to be the full, not necessarily the, hey, we're thinking about this project. How about some money? And then it takes them 7 years to get their piece of it behind. We'd want to position ourselves as the sort of later in the process funding organization, I think, for the big stuff anyway.
Thanks for that. And Director Hillian.
Thanks. Since this is a workshop, I'm feeling relatively comfortable, wander all over the place. How locked in are we with the school district on what their plans are for new schools that might involve playing fields and things like that? And do we have any idea whether the armed forces expansion and some of the money that they're going to put into infrastructure could in fact address playing fields and other such amenities?
through the chair, Trustee Wheat might want to answer that, but I understand they are working on a long-range facilities master plan, the school district right now. And I'm sure she has far more information than I do. And then Doug might be able to answer the D&D question.
Okay, no, thank you. You're correct. We're just in the early stages of our long-range facility plan. Our last capital submission to the ministry, or for a while, we've only had one new school location identified, and that was in Union Bay, and that was aligned with the project that was all underway, the big development project. So at this time, there were no new schools requested in our capital plan. But once we go through complete our long-range facility plan, we'll have a better idea if if we would need them, but based on predicted student enrollment in the valley, we won't be increasing in size in terms of students based on birth rates, unless we get a huge increase in community population.
Thanks for providing that additional context. And that does kind of raise a point that, you know, in creating this ability to support field amenities through our budgeting process, to me, the intent is to address existing facilities that we have that aren't meeting the need. I mean, there's school district fields that could very much use some improvements just in terms of grass surfaces, especially on this side of town, or you know, a washroom facility. But you know, unless we're talking about really improving what improving on some kind of facility gap, I wouldn't want to see the funding go toward providing capital funds for something that is typically a provincial responsibility. So, although I do know that there has been some new high schools built that did get artificial turf fields put in cooperation with the municipality. So I guess I wouldn't want to say that we would not do that, but if we're looking at, you know, a new elementary school going in and we're going to help pay for the cost of seeding grass and putting in irrigation, I would be reluctant to see the funds used in that kind of way. But that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding, I guess this is more around probably the larger partners such as the school district, is the intention that the funding would be kind of aligned with those usage agreements, like long-term usage kind of agreements in terms of those larger capital funding, that there would be agreements in place around that? Because feasibly you could have a big ask for, you know, school district has a lot of playing fields. So just curious about that.
Through the chair, I don't think we contemplated that, but I mean, certainly we could, especially if we're investing quite a bit of money. I mean, it is a very typical thing that if you're investing a lot of money into something that there's an expectation of that public use. The school district have been fantastic partners, but I do know that piecing together the money, as I understand, to maintain them is very hard. And sometimes it ends up, it's a question of, do we invest in the classroom or the field, right? So again, they've been really great partners. So I'm sure we could work through something like that if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for prioritization? No? Okay. So the funding allocation process, and this is a little bit tricky to follow. We're still kind of working through it. So really would love to have feedback on this. I did get, we put this together with some feedback of some of the other municipal staff in places that they've worked. It's meant, so there's opportunity for user groups to provide some feedback into what they see as maybe some improvements or amenities that could go forward, but also make sure that the field owners have the last say before their application would come forward to the Rec Commission, because ultimately they are the ones that would likely be funding a big bulk of that and maintaining it. So if we start at the bottom, stage one would be the Sports Field Advisory Committee would make a recommendation to the field operators for field improvements and amenity upgrades. So as we've heard throughout the field allocation policy process, we do have a sport field advisory group that is providing feedback into that process. And there's throughout the whole process so far, there's been a lot of discussion. If we only had this at this field, we could get more time. If we only had this at this field, it would make it a better field. So this is an opportunity to continue to have that dialogue with them and put forward some ideas and recommendations. Now, understanding that the field operators and the field owners only have so much money, and we're hoping that this funding can help fill some gaps, but it may not be able to provide all the funding for these upgrades or these amenities. So the owners of the fields, which we're calling the operators, they ultimately have to look at their own capital plans and determine, like with their councils or with the rec commission or with their nonprofit board, what their priorities are. So they take those recommendations, they look at their own, and then from there they put in a proposal, we would provide them guidance based on the policy, but maybe it looks more like a proposal and they have to hit the mark on the policy elements, and then it would come forward to the rec commission, and as staff, CVRD staff, we would facilitate that process and help with the scoring of that process. It does make it a little bit awkward because we are partners in artificial turf fields. So. Any thoughts or ideas about that process?
I just had a question about the Sports Field Advisory Committee. That's a committee that we would put together and would meet once or twice a year or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And we would develop a formal terms of reference. We would probably take a lot of what has been used through the field allocation process, where they've got not every single user group, but representation from rugby, from soccer, just not all the single user groups. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, Director Brown.
Thanks. And following up on that, that was sort of my question too, but it would also include the field owners,
So
or was that a separate?
that's a separate. So the Sports Field Advisory Committee make their recommendations to the field owners. Field owners look at their own capital plans. Then they can meet together. We probably bring everyone together. The Recreation Leadership Group meets often, and it would probably be the same people looking at it. And then it would come forward to the Recreation Commission. And of course, we would all have to do our own due diligence in terms of what's in our budget planning and, and so forth, so on and so forth. So,
Okay.
so it's just advisory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I was going, just trying to get an inkling of the staff time needed for this. Like, is this a once a year intake? Are we going to allow intake throughout the year? Are we there yet even? We're not there yet.
We're not there yet. At maximum, I would think it would be once a year. We
Yeah.
may even want to look at once every 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Director Graves.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think to put things in perspective, though, when you talk about facilities in rural areas, especially where they're 20, 25, 30 minutes away from town, most of these fields are actually either in SD71 property or else they're community halls. And we do have a small community hall service where we keep them on life support, basically. So when you talk about them coming forward with, enough capital to do an upgrade, I mean, they're having enough trouble paying their insurance. So although they do have the facilities, I'm thinking, of some of the halls. I mean, Black Creek is probably exceptionally good at their running their hall, and they actually can keep it in the black. Merville not so much so, and some of the halls in the south as well. So, I think it takes more. If you're talking about them coming up with the initial budget to say take a field and flatten it and reseed it so they can actually play ball on it or something, it's very difficult. So I think that has to be borne as well when you're considering this. The fact that they are being operated by volunteers, an ever diminishing amount of volunteers and very limited capacity, but they have a real need. It's really served the community. I mean, outside of, and I know this is all over BC, right? It's happening all over. Some of them are actually turning land over to the regional district or something like that. So that may be something in the future, but just to bear in mind, it's a shoestring budget out there.
Absolutely.
And Director Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I guess I'm curious whether it be at the committee stages or otherwise, how the policy might take an equity lens to the decisions and the recommendations. And specifically, I think an example that's come up most recently, and I think I asked it at the last commission around the challenges with the cricket club and supporting the development of a established cricket field in the Comox Valley. Um, and why I mention that as an example is because we have all obviously very successful, popular, long-standing community groups who do a lot in the community to support recreation. And we have newer groups, again, cricket, pickleball, or otherwise. And so, and based on the fact that obviously, not all will use field specifically, but I'm wondering if there's a process that we can use around understanding how we kind of create some equity around whether it be the the objectives that we had for things like increasing playable fields, when we think about fields being utilized for multiple sports, rather just within the context of one sport. So I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts around how we might manage that.
Lisa, can we go back a slide? Yeah, so go for it. Okay, so there's two things with that. So the field allocation policy is going to address that. So there is that opportunity for those new groups to get in where in the past it may have been very difficult for them to get field space. So that is being addressed through that. And then also through the prioritization framework, where we've got equity and inclusion in there as well. So those two things, and those are kind of two ways that that's being addressed. Again, with cricket, challenges right now is that field size is that it's very difficult to find a field that they could play that with a permanent structure in the middle because they are being used for other things. So we're still trying to figure that one out. Anything else on the allocation process? Does that seem, is it good to leave that there for food for thought and see what, when we bring back the draft policy, we can talk about it more if it's needed? It's not a super smooth process, but I think it's a good way to make sure that voices are heard. Okay, this is the tricky part. Funding thresholds. So what we've gotten here is the idea of an annual budget being set through the financial planning cycle. And the question of maximum funding thresholds. Is the commission looking to pay for all of a project, a part of a project? As Director Brown said, be the last funder versus the first funder. To give some context into how much things cost, a metal 5-seat bleacher is about, I think it's just one of them, is about 60,000. A washroom that is going to be like the one that will be installed at the artificial turf field is in the range of 200 to 350,000. Upgrading fields to a sand base can be around the $1 million mark. I know, it's a lot. It's amazing. Clubhouses, 500 to 600,000. And then lights could be anywhere from 800 to $1 million. Yeah, and just the hydro alone too could be up to 150. And I don't know if Doug, you wanna.
No, I just add that, going down this path, amenities and field upgrades, we're not talking $10,000 or $20,000. We're up there in the larger numbers. And some of that consideration when you move into the funding thresholds, is there different considerations for projects above, I'd say, the $700,000 mark or below the $700,000 mark, because those are very different outcomes. Obviously, if you're looking at lighting and major field improvements, you're above that $700,000 threshold. So, we've debated a little bit of, we create those two thresholds as well because they're different projects, or something more just to think about when you're thinking about this piece. And then back to that time readiness of Director Cullum's kind of 24 months idea in 18 to 24 months. So yeah, it's needed in the community, and I think there's lots of clubs that'll come forward with, you know, amenities such as fencing plans or washrooms, but the reality is they're not going to come forward with a ton of money. So yeah. So that's something to think about in your percentage, or do you just cap it at a dollar amount? See where it goes.
I think this is really hard to judge before we know what's gonna come through
Mhm.
the process and how much money we'll have aside when it gets to that point. And also the rural versus urban divide, as Director Grieve just brought up, that a percentage may make a lot less sense for a nonprofit versus, you know, a municipal partner that's willing to take on the operations and unlocking bathrooms versus you know, the type of improvements that might be asked for out in the rural areas. So maybe I don't know. To me, I just feel like I'm not ready to tackle that piece. Director Brown.
I'm feeling the same way. I do think that having two maximum funding thresholds would be helpful. So for nonprofit operated, or like Director Grieve said, for those sort of rural and community-based projects might have a different mechanism, but from the municipalities, we would want more contribution directly, maybe.
Mhm.
But having any sense of what those numbers look like, I'm not there yet.
Through the chair, perhaps to maybe something to think about is that we'll bring the policy back, but maybe we run it as a pilot to start and then see where we get. Again, we don't have, I mean, there's $200,000 in there this year. We'll have to see what the Recreation Commission allocates next year, but maybe that's one way to do it, is run it as maybe a 2-year pilot and see what we get.
We love pilots in local government. Director Brown, go ahead.
Thanks. That 200,000 is reserve funding?
Mhm.
So that's not an annual reserve contribution? That's a one-time to get us started contribution? We have to decide that every budget?
Still to be determined.
Okay,
That's the-
okay, good to know.
This year was the first year, so I'll have to see what the next rec commission decides. Yeah.
Director Hillian.
Thanks, Chair. Have we ever considered the possibility of starting some type of community facilities endowment fund to try and attract money from people out there in the community who want to support these sorts of things as a way of building up a reserve fund for these types of community facilities. I don't know. It just strikes me it might be a possibility. I just think, for example, about Lake Trail Field and how it used to be a major community hub, and it had all sorts of sports. You couldn't go down there in the summertime without seeing 3 ball games going on and soccer through the winter. Now, I don't even know if it gets used now other than for people to walk their dogs. And I don't see the school district ever coming up with the money to rehabilitate that field. And it's such an incredible, it's like a natural amphitheater down there. And, there may be other examples like that, but I just wonder if there's a way that we can tap into, private sector, community fundraising, people leaving money in their wills for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think there is a way. It's creating that whole structure similar to maybe the municipal park services have, but we do have a structure set up the CVRD Park Service that like outlines those type of funding possibilities. I think it would come after we kind of understand from the sport user groups what the amenity priorities are, and then we can maybe build out a possibility area to donate, contribute. We're able to give charity receipts, so it's very possible and probably quite easy. It's just a matter of kind of communicating to the community that we're looking for more than just the typical municipal fields in the past and the typical CBRD fields and school district fields in the past. So we haven't really communicated that to the community yet.
Anything else?
Doesn't look like it.
No? Okay. Do we want to go back to policy purpose? Because we are at the end now. Policy purpose. So given everything that's been discussed, how do you feel this aligns with where we're going? Understanding it's the next step will be to develop the draft policy, bring it back for further discussion, see if it meets the mark. And so to strategically invest in field improvements and amenities that enhance usability, quality, and sustainability, support both rural and urban areas, ensure current inventory is fully utilized, prepare for future growth and demand. Does the policy purpose meet the goals? And is there anything that we should be adding or removing?
Director Brown.
I'm just thinking about what Director Hillian said about Lake Trail and having something in here around community equity or equity amongst communities or something like that. So we're spreading out the money to those that need it the most, maybe.
Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just, maybe I've missed it. Maybe it's been brought up or mentioned already, but I'm just wondering about one of the biggest playing fields that we have in the Comox Valley, the Island Corridor Foundation, and where that falls into the discussion here today.
Sorry, could you just clarify what you, I didn't understand the connection with Island Corridor Foundation.
What I made mention of is I'm just wondering where the Island Corridor Foundation falls into place with regards to the discussion today. That's part of the largest playing field that we have in the Comox Valley right now, and I haven't heard any discussion revolving around that and whether there should be a discussion or not. Thanks.
Sorry, could you clarify what playing field you're referring to? Just so I'm not familiar, so, all right.
I'm referring to the Island Corridor Foundation, like the Island Corridor, as a playing field.
Oh, okay. Like
how many people utilize that trail right now? And how many people would like to utilize that trail for cycling, for horsebacking, hiking, etc.? Like, to me, that's a huge playing field that we haven't really brought into this conversation. And I'm just asking the question, should we be talking about the Island Corridor Foundation right now with regards to it being a playing field, like a recreation facility?
well, this is for like field improvement specifically, not general recreation. So it was my understanding that we're talking about like playing fields, like for soccer and baseball. Yeah, existing, and it's for improvements and amenities, not creation of, but I don't do.
Agreed.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, to ask you 3 times, I just thought you were telling me about a Island Corridor Foundation playing field that I wasn't familiar with, which is why I kept asking for a clarification, so apologies for that. Yeah, does staff want to say anything further to that, or?
No, I think you got it. That's our understanding too, is just sports playing fields.
Yeah. For the equity piece that Director Brown brought up, it could just be an additional enhanced usability, quality, equity, and sustainability in the first policy line, if that works for everyone.
Yeah.
Director Grant.
So we had $200,000, and the more I think about this, that's not a lot of money. Like, you could run out of that in about a week.
Chair, we can't hear the director online.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know. His mic was on, but we'll try the one beside him. Can you hear him now? Sorry, we're having a mic problem.
Okay, I'll be James for a minute. Does that work?
Okay,
There you go.
perfect.
I see, I knew I'd been cut off. So I'm just saying that, you know, I think $200,000 is probably not enough money to really, like, you're only gonna get very small requests at that amount. Like, I could spend $200,000 in one project in Comox and we'd be broke. So I'm just concerned that maybe we're not starting with enough in the pot to actually get a proper look at how this could work.
Yeah, certainly through the chair to Director Grant. Yes, but this year was the starting point, so yeah, it's gonna take some time.
So how would we get more money into the system then? Like, if we've got 200 now, would we have to add another 100 and then another 100? Is that how you, and then keep it topped up? Or I'm not really clear on how the funding of this would work.
Through the chair, I mean, there's the regional budget process, but perhaps looking at Director Hillian's idea of an endowment fund is one as well. There is, and this is, it wouldn't necessarily go into our fund, but it may help on the other side. The idea of a capital improvement levy going in with the fees and charges for the regional fees and charges framework, but that may help to offset some of that funding as well.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that you might not get a very clear view on a pilot project if you don't have enough money in the pot to start with.
So, yeah, great points. I think we also have eventually a turf field borrowing that'll expire, so it'll be a big decision then how much you want to continue to implement. So I think we'll take this away. Your comment is more, when do we implement this plan? Like, we're just working on the policy now, but is it appropriate to put it out there to our partners in 2027? Or do we wait until that financial plan's done and then see how much money is there and then maybe then we put it out? So I think that's a good point we got to consider is,
Yeah, like,
what's the appropriate amount to have in the budget before we actually implement
okay.
it? Yeah.
so you could put lights on Highland Ball Field tomorrow afternoon and everyone would be thrilled.
Yeah, we don't have the money though. 600,000.
Could maybe run the wires there to begin with.
BC Hydro costs 150.
Yeah, and I guess timing wise, I mean, we're working on the policy here. There's kind of a framework to get it off the ground. So realistically, it could be 2 rounds of budget funding before we're looking to allocate for a project in any case. So there will be a budget process next year that could inform whether or not the board wants to proceed with the similar amount or increase it or take a different approach. So early days. Director Morin.
Thank you. Did we do a field fields condition assessment for everything? That's what I thought, but I couldn't see it in the last study per se. So would that not play into this as well in terms of prioritizing? I mean, there's obviously additional asks like lighting and shelters and things like that, but wouldn't a starting point be those condition assessments that are already there in terms of where the most dire need is?
Through the chair to the director. So they do note the condition. It's just now it's a matter of figuring out what priority it would be and what's the best investment, because there might be some fields where the condition is not great, but they're not going to be used for competitive sports. They're going to be used for just use in the community for family functions, things like that. So the ground, it doesn't need to be the same, that sort of thing. So I think that's where the field owners and the sport advisory group can come forward and say, hey, these are where we think the priorities best lay. But the condition assessments definitely help to say
It plays into the whole evaluation. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's after 5 o'clock and we still have another report to discuss in camera. So if anyone wants to have a chance to make any final comment before we move on. Don't see anyone jumping at the opportunity. So just And this is really just a workshop, so we just need to do receipt. You don't need any further direction beyond what we've done here today. So we'll dispense with receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried, and motion to move in, or no, we've done the, do we do it a second time? It's on the agenda. Yes, okay, perfect. Yeah, moved by Grieve, seconded by Hillian. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, we'll move in camera.